Okay, we're
Okay,
ready to
thank
go.
you. Okay.
And good evening from Philadelphia. Frank here with yet another edition of UFO News Network Sunday. As always, we're going to get right down to it, not waste any time. Let's go over to my co-host, Chant, and let's bring in our special guest for this evening, shall we?
Thank you, Frank. We have a very special show tonight. This person I'm about to bring onto the show and introduce, he really doesn't need an introduction. He's legendary in the realm of ufology. Everybody knows him. His name is Alejandro Rojas. He's a writer, podcaster, lecturer, and digital content creator focused on science, space, science fiction, and UFOs. He has a keen interest in the unexplained and is often featured in documentaries, television shows, and news interviews. Alejandro runs the UFO news website openminds.tv, and his articles can also be found in the Huffington Post, Den of Geek, and his personal blog, AlejandroRojas.com. He is also the co-organizer of the annual International UFO Congress, which he hosts as the Master of Ceremonies. Lastly, he is on the board of SCU as board advisor. One of the board advisors. He actually does such a wonderful job no matter what he does, whether he's interviewing anybody or welcoming folks into his UFO Congress, which he's well known for. I'd love to be able to have the privilege and honor of welcoming Alejandro Rojas onto our show. Thank you for coming onto our show, Alejandro. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm doing much better after that wonderful introduction. Thank you so much for all those kind words.
Yeah, well, we love you, Alejandro. How are you doing tonight, by the way?
I'm doing well, keeping very busy, especially lately because there's so much news going on, which of course we'll get into. But
Yes.
Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. I have a bit of a stuffy nose. I think it's allergies, but other than that, I'm well.
Okay, good. Yeah, I hear you have just a little bit of an allergy thing there, but you sound fantastic. I did want to kind of get into an interesting topic here, and so I'll go ahead and touch on that, and that is a Navy release. The U.S. Navy drafted new guidelines for reporting UFOs. I wanted to read a quote by you, and I also want to read a little bit of what military.com said about it. What you said regarding the, I'm sorry, actually, let me just go straight into the U.S. Navy drafting new guidelines for reporting UFOs. I know I have my, do you mind going to that real quickly there, Alejandro, while I bring up something? I'm sorry, just had it just disappeared right in front of me. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah, and just Alejandro, on top of all that, they didn't just draft the guidelines, but they released that information to the public, which or through the public, through the major news media. I think that's really interesting because they really seem to want to get that word out there to naval personnel that they're pretty serious about this. They want these reports coming in.
I agree 100%. I think that's a really important aspect is that this was a public announcement through Politico. But of course, there's been a bunch of stories out there. Pretty much every major news network has covered it at this point. And I think that, that's an important aspect. My perspective is we do know, despite what they've been telling us for the last few decades, that the military takes UFO cases seriously. In particular, there's a story I got, and a lot of this information was aided by Paul Dean, a UFO researcher in Australia, where It's a thing called OPREP. They use this flag word for an important occurrence that needs to go up the chain of command. And there are UFO cases that use this OPREP flag word.
Yep.
And these are important cases usually. However, these cases we've seen in the 60s, 70s, this is during the time where they've said that they haven't had an interest in UFOs. So we know that they have, but they haven't had a public interest in UFOs. They've always said, whenever researchers inquire, they send us to this UFO fact sheet that they have at the National Archives for the Air Force saying, oh, since 1969, we don't really care about UFOs anymore. So we know that isn't the case. This is the first time where they're kind of coming out and saying, we do take this seriously, despite what they've said in the past. And we are going to be taking in reports. I think that what we've seen is, these servicemen and women have not felt comfortable reporting UFOs, and there hasn't been kind of this standing, order, or they haven't known what to do whenever they have these occurrences.
And that's the audience for this, though, Alejandro. That's the audience for this release. The public at large doesn't really care. UFO buffs like ourselves, we love this stuff, but, so what? It's for the Navy personnel. That's who this information, that's who this release is for. Let's not kid ourselves here.
I would argue it's for both. It's for the Navy personnel, but also the public. And the reason I say that is that anything that the major and Navy personnel do, for instance, when they have a UFO or encounter or something, they're going to share, well, here's what I did. When it comes to the Nimitz, for example, that we know what they did, but there was no standing orders. When they got back, they were made fun of when they got back to the Nimitz after the pilots had their encounter. So, I mean, all of this leaks to the public.
Yeah, they still will. They will still take some ribbing, even if it is official. They'll still take some ribbing,
but at least there was no standing protocol. By making this public, they didn't have to share this with the public. So sure, these are reporting guidelines for the Navy personnel, but they're making it public that they're going to be taking these reports and that they're going to be taking them seriously. So it is a very public thing. Essentially, it's a change in their stance. We're not going to ignore this anymore. We're not going to send you packing when you ask about it. Instead, we're going to take this seriously. We're going to encourage our people to report these things. And then we're essentially, it's this change that we're going to take this topic seriously now.
And this is going to get Chant, let me finish my next point here. This is going to get around because just like we have our own UFO-specific outlets, websites, podcasts, and so on and so forth, so does the Navy. And this news is going to get around to the naval personnel. This might shake out some very interesting cases.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's exactly true. And then to your earlier point, too, what's interesting is that they have apparently already rolled out these guidelines, but they're not sharing with the public what these guidelines are. So we may hear from a service personnel in the future, what these guidelines are. Hopefully we will through some of these stories that do come out of the woodwork. But I think you make a good point.
So I was talking to somebody about this today, and they were saying the Navy doesn't need to update UFO reporting procedures. They just need to follow JNAP 146E and AFM 55-11. JNAP stands for Joint Army-Navy Publication. Do you have any comment on that?
Well, I mean, those are standing orders that have been around for decades, a very long time. And in fact, that's kind of what I was referring to earlier. There used to be this section, at least for the Air Force, of the JNAP outlines. But then that changed to this OPREP system of kind of flagging these. So it's changed up a little bit. However, even though procedures are on the books somewhere, doesn't mean your people know about it. Back when they came up with those guidelines, they had posters. I used this in this blog that I made about this whole thing. I even used a section of the poster where they said, report these things. And they show enemy aircraft, enemy ships, and they even show unidentified flying objects. And they have a little picture of a disc and a little picture of this, Flash Gordon looking spaceship. So, but this is more, something that they're communicating across the line so people are aware of what the procedures are and what you do. And I think this is kind of, at least internally, a whole kind of PR program for UFOs. It's essentially saying, hey, guys, it's okay. You can report these. Please do.
And not only, they want them. The upper brass somewhere in the Department of the Navy, they want these reports. And I think that should be very interesting news for all of us UFO buffs.
I wanted to bring up what military.com does say about this fascinating topic we're bringing up here, and that is exactly what Alejandro was mentioning earlier regarding Politico having brought this current news to our attention. They say as part of this effort, Politico reported, the Navy is updating and formalizing the process by which reports of any such suspected incursions can be made to the cognizant authorities. A new message to the fleet that will detail the steps for reporting is in draft. The initiative comes amid increasing interest from lawmakers and the public following the release of classified files from the Defense Intelligence Agency that revealed the funding of projects that investigated UFOs, wormholes, alternate dimensions, and other obscure topics that typically leads to the conspiracy theory fringes of the web. Then just to further finish with what they said, right now we have a situation in which UFOs and UAPs are treated as anomalies to be ignored rather than anomalies to be explored, it added. We have systems that exclude the information and dump it. The Navy also said it's taking a more proactive approach in briefing lawmakers. Last thing they said is, in response to requests for information from congressional members and staff, Navy officials have provided a series of briefings by senior naval intelligence officials, as well as aviators who reported hazards to aviation safety, the service told Politico. Okay, moving along, I wanted to bring up an interesting topic, and that is on the minds of a lot of people in the ufology community, and that is unsigned DoD Form 1910 for video release. I wanted to bring up a quote by Alejandro recently when he was reporting on this across social media. Alejandro said, and I began the quote, "Just talked to Lou Elizondo. He wanted to reassure me there will definitely be a public component to all of this. The Navy will not share raw data. But he says they will be providing information to DoD leadership and Congress. That information will be used to create reports for the public. He says the raw data will be classified. They will need to protect classified info such as sources and methods. The info provided to the public will likely include information on their interactions with UAP and stats." He says it is kind of like nukes and North Korea. They do not share details about what they know, but they do inform the public. NK has the nukes, North Korea has the nukes. The public is not left in the dark and will not be left in the dark regarding the Navy UFO's findings. By the way, we also have an interview tentatively scheduled this week and wanted to get a little bit more input from you on that, Alejandro, please.
Yeah, I think this is a really important point because the Washington Post had come out with a story. The headline was Navy, no release of UFO information to the general public expected. And this gave the impression that the Navy would not be sharing anything with the public. And in a way, that's true. And I think this kind of comes back more that the reporters didn't really know the right questions to ask. They didn't ask, is this information going to be shared at some point? And that's the point that Lou really wanted to share when we talked today. And he was more than happy to say, yeah, do please share this with people. Why would Lou know? Because, Tom DeLonge made the point that we were involved with the Navy getting this information out. I, already saw the writing on the wall. I wrote a blog about how, that's the case, that the Stars had everything to do with this. And then Chris Mellon, when this DD 1910 form, which we're going to talk about, came out, he also spoke to the fact that, we did have a lot to do with all this information coming out. We have been working with these politicians and with the military leadership in the background on all of this. So they are in a position to know. And what I find is kind of, behind the scenes with Lou sharing this information is that he is in the know. So these guys are a part of these conversations. So Lou shared, and, I think the North Korea thing is a great example that, of course, we don't get all that raw intel that they acquire on North Korea and their nukes, but they do share with us some information. They share with us even locations and facilities at times. So there's varying amounts of information they share with us about North Korea and their program. But what he says is that it'll be similar. At some point in the future, they will be sending reports to their military leadership, to Congress, and then it is, according to him, part of the plan that they will be releasing these reports about their findings, their interactions. And I think that's one thing that we have to keep in mind. And I know a lot of people are hesitant about To the Stars and some of the people involved, but having some direct access to them and also following the story, we haven't really found them to be wrong. I mean, they have been making ground on all of these things, and we do have kind of a friend in the UFO business here. It's like the Shane Company, a friend in the diamond industry. We do have these guys championing us to make sure that this happens. Almost like a little lobbying group.
Things are a lot more interesting these days. You
That's
go
for
back
sure.
5 years and you think how pretty well dead things were compared to what they are now. There's a lot to talk about. I mean, those were kind of the dark ages, the middle part of the decade. Just not a whole lot going on. But based on your conversations with Elizondo, it's pretty clear that there is an outside team To the Stars Academy, and there's also very much an inside team as well.
I think you make a great point there. In fact, in the Navy response, they said that Congress wanted to be briefed, and the naval intelligence officers briefed Congress on the UFO situation. There are no, even though there are people in the intelligence community, IC they call it, which is a term I think we're going to be using more, such as people like Chris Mellon and Elizondo come from intelligence. They don't come from naval intelligence. So who are these naval intelligence people that were briefing Congress on UFOs of all things? So,
and at the very least, who are the Congress people? Are they senators? Are they representatives?
Well, we know a little bit about that. We do know that the Senate and the House Arms Committees were briefed. We also know that one of the science committees, I think it was the House Science Committee, also had some briefings.
Okay, that would have Berra. And I believe he was at the Politico Roundtable last year, and he talked about this a little bit. Do you know that he is specifically one of the Congress people briefed?
We do have this through some information. Nick Pope did a great article in The Guardian. Nick Pope worked for the MOD investigating UFOs, and he found a lot of great information and talked with some of the Nimitz witnesses to find out where the different areas were. And so there is some evidence, especially with the armed committees, but not necessarily for the Space Committee. But he heard that, I believe anecdotally, I'd have to look at that story again, that it was the Space Committee. He even said that the armed services kind of said, hey, no, this is our arena. Leave this to us. You don't need to bother with this.
Okay, Alejandro, I wanted to bring to your attention something that a document and FOIA expert Paul Dean brought to our attention. He's also known as a young gun in ufology. Regarding the DoD 1910 form, he said this. I spoke briefly with Paul Dean earlier today in Australia, and he stated he knew for an absolute fact the 1910 form cited is genuine. He also knows that the process was slapdash and corners were cut. This is precisely why the DoD's public affairs people did not confirm the provenance of the videos last year. Paul says, and I quote, the exact words used for the second time in 12 months were that folks' noses were out of joint at public affairs. Paul also said that indeed some of the issues were raised with the 1910 form and the process generally are irrelevant. But the whole thing will turn out to be a very low import in the long run. Paul stated, and I quote, that the Navy has confirmed the authenticity of the videos to Congress. I can assure you of that much. Soon, very recently, filmed interviews with pilots will be revealed, and the incidents in the videos and others will be discussed properly. Paul also stated that from the Atlantic, at least, the pilots are very keen to be heard. He also confirmed that the USAF has had recent cases, but wasn't told anything else and is grateful for what he has to hand already. How do you feel about what Paul just said there, Alejandro?
Paul's a genius. I think that Paul says it very well there, and I agree with him 100%. And it's great that he brings in the aspect that it's not that big of a deal. It's not. The only people that have questioned where the veracity of these videos are mostly UFO people in the UFO industry, kind of UFO nerds. And I've even said, people who want to kind of tie the strings of some of these loose ends that are still out there. because it hasn't been a big deal. The media has not made a big deal out of it. Nobody's made a big deal out of it except for us UFO nerds. Is it important? Yeah, I think we always want to make sure that the provenance is solid. But the reason why nobody's paid attention, and this is one of the big things that's been lost on people, I think, is that, originally it was the New York Times who shared the first couple of those videos, and they said they got them from the DOD, that the DOD had released them. Well, nobody seemed to want to ask them, how did you get these? So that was the first thing I asked Leslie Kane once the story came out, and she said, we had this DD 1910. It is a document that shows that these things were released by the DOD. And she said, we vetted this document. We verify that it's real. We know with 100% certainty that this document is real. That really put things to rest. The New York Times had vetted it. And so the media ran with it. Everybody in the mainstream world was comfortable to say, okay, this has got to be legit. So it's not just Elizondo that was talking about this DD 1910. I know George Knapp had seen it. I actually had seen a copy of it as well, but Elizondo wasn't able to release it because it wasn't his to release. He was like, this, he's not releasing anything that wasn't in his ATIP program that he isn't allowed to make the call to release. Luckily, George Knapp did release this recently. But not only do we have then Elizondo and the New York Times verifying the veracity, we also have Harry Reid in the story with George Knapp when George Knapp released this document. So that the document is real is very, very strong. Some people have nitpicked, it looks weird. But I think Paul Dean has nailed a couple aspects on the head. First, that they were cutting corners, that they got this out quickly. So, there was less maybe deliberation on this document than there would normally be. The other thing that I think that he got exactly correct is that the PR department for the DOD did seem to be miffed about it. They said that this was supposed to go through us first. And I've heard people argue that's not true. That nowhere in those statements of the protocol, what's supposed to be done, is it a requirement that the press department be the last step. But obviously they seem to want it to be the last step. And so they have not been helpful at all. They've been very unhelpful to researchers. They have not been sharing information or documents with us. So for instance, I requested via FOIA this DD 1910 back, over a year ago, maybe close to 2 years ago now. And they haven't given it to us. They haven't given us anything. They've denied us any information. John Greenwald has got the most amount of information, but what's weird that they seem to be giving him the most amount of information. Granted, he is an expert in all of this stuff. He has contacts. He knows who to talk to, but he's also been very skeptical. He's kind of been spinning this in an anti-ATIP way, kind of like the DOD seems to be appreciating. That's speculation on my part, but I think it appears that Paul Dean is also speculating in these ways, and I think he's right.
Now you
I'm
mentioned,
glad,
let me jump in here real quick. You mentioned
Wonderful.
something weird, and the To the Stars Academy TV show is going to premiere at the end of this month. And what's weird to me is how little promotion it has gotten. What do you think about that?
Well, this is an interesting topic because I agree with you. It has got little promotion. They haven't gotten into the promotion mode yet. I have been in a little bit of contact with History Channel, especially because of Project Blue Book and other shows. And being in the press, I have access to kind of the back door for the press where we get our materials for all these different shows. And there has been little promotion, and they haven't started it yet, which is weird. And luckily, I'm getting Elizondo early because they haven't really started up. Hopefully, maybe that means next week they're going to start promoting it. But there's an indication that, and I'm not sure why they haven't promoted it. Maybe they're nervous about how it'll do. But there was an indication that there are a lot of people highly interested. I had gotten these photos, and I had gotten them from the History Channel and through proper channels, and I shared them online. People went wild. People were sharing them all over the place. Lou had heard about it, and Lou was like, hey, I heard about what you released. People were really freaking out, but I told him, hey, if Alejandro shared him, he must have had permission to. So even Lou had heard about it within a few hours of me posting it. So it was all over the place. And then I got a note from History Channel saying, "Hey, actually, that was released a little premature. Could you take those down for a little while?" And I said, "Sure," because I want them on my good side. So I did take those down. But the fervor that the posting of those pictures created, was kind of positive. Lou was really excited. He's like, wow, it seems like people are interested in the show. So there is a lot of interest, but you're right. I have not seen a lot of promotion yet.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up all that. By the way, I just shared the link to Paul Dean's wonderful website called UFOs Documenting the Evidence. Paul Dean, please look that up, everybody. He's a fantastic researcher and well known in the ufology community. Moving along to UFO Congress, wanted to compliment you, Alejandro, and this is from the heart. Everybody who is anybody wants to be in UFO Congress as a speaker. This is no secret. This is a star-studded event, and for good reason. You've worked very hard to have only the best folks at this wonderful convention that you have annually. It's held in Phoenix, Arizona, is my understanding. And wanted to know if you wouldn't mind expounding upon that so everybody can have the pleasure of hearing a little bit more about this fantastic convention that everybody should go to.
Yes, it's a lot of fun. It is September 4th through the 8th, and it's in downtown Phoenix this year. One of the things that we did when I first began managing it back in 2011, we brought it from Laughlin, Nevada, out to this beautiful place out here in Scottsdale, actually. And for me, that was a big deal. It was a big deal to bring it kind of front and center, to be bold. I think that's important that we be bold. We don't have to be shy about our interest in this field. And like Frank, like you mentioned, the mainstream or the masses are a lot more friendly to this topic than they were 5 years ago or so. So in 2011, it was still, people were very shy about all of that. And
even in Phoenix, even in the Phoenix area with the big lights case there.
Well, less than most places, but even in Phoenix, and I felt Laughlin, it felt like, we were still hiding in mom's basement or something. And I felt being bold and bringing it out to one of the beautiful venues where, lots of expensive conferences are held, was being bold and bringing it out. Now it's even better because now we're in downtown Phoenix. So we are literally in the heart of Phoenix, right next door to all the major news studios. So I'm really excited about this year. Now, I don't choose all the speakers. In fact, a lot of people know that I'm very conservative when it comes to UFOs, to the UFO topic. So so I bring, the people with the more credibility. Karen Brard, she's the new owner of the conference, and she is bringing in, she has her own perspective. But what I really love about what Karen brings to all of this is I've always had a concern for making sure that women participate in this field. Because I think I have always had a problem. I don't like good old boy systems. I think they happen everywhere. And, as a man, we have to be cognizant that we are prone to doing this. So we have to, I think, physically keep ourselves, make sure we're reminding ourselves, hey, we need to include others. And I think I did that fairly well, but Karen does it even better. I mean, you always need the input and perspective of those from other communities that you're trying to engage. So she has done an even better job of seeking out, and she works very, very hard at seeking out some of the women who are researchers in this field and bringing them out to speak at the conference. So we have definitely a larger percentage of women speaking than most conferences. We'll have more to add, but I think it's fun. What I love about our conference is we try to be very brave. We don't bring just the same person that's at every conference. You see the same names everywhere. We pay attention all year to UFO news, and we find people who are doing exciting stuff right here, right now. And we bring those people, even if nobody knows who they are, we are confident that people are going to love what they're doing and the information they're going to share. And we like to feel like we're setting the standard, that when we bring these speakers, we're kind of star making in a way that a lot of people will be like, and it happens every year. People will be like, wow, I never knew this person existed and they're doing so much cool work. And then all of a sudden those people are speaking at all the conferences. And and are the hot ticket and the hot items. So it's fun to be able to do that, to light up people, to bring new and exciting information to people every year.
And do you have a
I just
lineup
wanna-
together yet?
Go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to ask about that.
We have the majority of our lineup. We don't have all of them yet. We certainly have some exciting people to list still. We're going to have Stanton Friedman. He's a normal. He's all over the place, but this will be the last year since he's retiring. So that's going to be kind of sad, and it's going to be nice to for people to spend time with him. Of course, the hot topics, ATIP and everything. The guy who is the top of the heap with releasing information on this is George Knapp. He's so extremely important. His work is important. He's a mentor to me. I'm one of his biggest fans. George Knapp will be there. David Hatcher Childress from Ancient Aliens, awesome guy. He lives here in Arizona, so luckily we get to spend a lot of time with him, and he's just such a cool guy. Jeremy Corbell will be there, but Carolyn Corey, a lot of people have been really interested in her work lately. Chase Kletsky we're going to have there, of course, a great researcher. She loves to work the conference, so we even had her speak this year, but she's like, no, I want to be at the front desk helping out. So she'll probably, when you come to register, you'll be able to get your name tag from Chase. But we've got Richard Dolan and his lovely wife, Tracy. They actually got engaged at our conference. Nick Pope got engaged and married at our conferse, by the way.
Wow.
That sort of thing.
Well, then in the future, that tells me maybe I should avoid your conference, actually.
Maybe. It depends.
Well,
And then you guys had it.
Oh,
I wanted
ahead,
to just say you guys had an excellent guest last week. That was Michael Masters. He's going to be at our conference, and a lot of other names. So check out ufocongress.com to check out some of these cool people.
Yeah, so
Now,
just
I
to
want
say the name of that
to,
website.
Chant, I want to
before-
double back and ask about
Yes.
George Knapp, because to be honest with you, you can't question his work and everything he's done, but he does an awful lot of criticism of the UFO community, and frankly, I find it a little annoying. Alejandro, you want to give me your feedback on all that? I mean, if he's got a gripe with somebody, let him name a name here and there, instead of paint the entire community with this broad brush.
That's interesting. So I guess I would be curious to know, like, what sort of comment has he made in particular that you feel is unfair?
Well, just in general, that the UFO community continues to shoot itself in the foot, that it's a very negative. He's made the comments on a pretty regular basis, especially.
Gotcha.
He's past my bedtime, you have to understand. But I've heard enough of it, and he does it on kind of a regular basis. It's sort of this old guard that's very negative towards TTSA. And to be honest with you, there's a few here and there. There's no question about it. You mentioned Greenewald, who's a critic, and there are some others. I know that there's some hostility towards Stephen Greer in those circles. But beyond that, I mean, that's a few guys. That's not the entire field. If he's got a gripe, he should name a name.
Yeah, I don't know, and it could be that I am maybe a little jaded over time as well. But I think he's right in that we see, we don't interact as much with everybody out there. For instance, I don't know, and this is getting into, whenever you're a public figure, you're attacked by a lot of people. And there are particular stories that he covers that have that happen. And for him, I think prominent in his mind are two things, are TTSA, but also Bigelow. I mean, here's a guy who's got billions of dollars, who has a passion for UFOs, and decides he wants to start spending his money in it. And what happened since the get-go, the UFO community, not all of them, but a large percentage, I would say over half, just bashed the guy like crazy. They just love to hate him. And this became an issue for him over the years. In fact, he decided he didn't want to interact with the community so much over it. And so that happens, which is a frustrating situation for George, who is a friend of his and, was following all of his work. And then we see this kind of repeated with Lou Elizondo and Tom DeLonge. Tom DeLonge's a young guy. He's a character. I could see, I guess, maybe why people would be a little frustrated with him. But someone like Elizondo, who's the same type of thing. And, I don't think people realize, and this is something George would know, and it's something I know, people don't realize these people get really hurt over this stuff. I'm sure, You all do. I do sometimes.
Some,
I've brought a thick
it
skin.
could be. You get
But
a little upset, but
yeah.
if you're upset with somebody, you take it up with them. You don't broad brush the entire community.
Well,
You know
if
what I'm
you're
saying?
getting nailed by tons of people, there isn't really one name. You have whole groups of people. I would say you brought up Greenwald.
I did.
He's got a whole army of people, behind him that are kind of spewing some pretty negative stuff out there. So
Sure. And there was Greer. I know there have been some other critics as well.
Well, that's a good point. There's Greer, and his other concern is this misreporting. You know what I've been surprised is every time I contact someone like Leslie Kane or others, and I ask, has anybody asked you about this? And they say no. Nobody is contacting these sources and getting the correct information. Instead, they're going half-cocked with all of this wild stuff. And some of these people are my friends, and they're out there doing lectures and everything and saying, oh, this is a big conspiracy. This has been planned for so many years. This is disclosure. And, it's these puppet hole masters who are behind Lou doing this, or Bigelow doing that, or Eric Davis doing this, or George Knapp doing that. And those things are just assumptions that are not true. And it's very unprofessional behavior. It's a sort of behavior that gets the UFO field in trouble by making these unsubstantiated claims. And that's also the sort of thing he's referring to, because there are very few who are just reporting the facts out there.
Now, you brought up a very interesting name right there, and that was Leslie Kane. You interviewed her in the immediate aftermath of the New York Times story. I listened to it. You asked, the right question. How often is this happening? Because that was a key point. This seems to be increasing in frequency, and that was part of the catalyst for getting all this going. And you asked her, what was the frequency? And she said, I don't know, maybe 10 or 12. Do you remember that?
I do a bit.
Okay. It really stuck in my head because it seems to me, and I think I've never asked you specifically, but I assume we're all on the same page here. We think that some of these UFOs are some form of ET. Would you agree with that?
I would say I would think that that's a possibility. That's certainly a possibility.
Fair enough. That the key and we know there are literally thousands of UFO reports. Not all of them are even possibly ET. Most of them get explained. We know all that. We know the number that gets thrown around out there. But also, I want to follow up, and we're going to get to the SCU conference, and you're part of that too. We're going to ask about that organization. But that question, again, the best question asked of Lou Elizondo. He said he didn't know. Do you have any idea how we're going to at least try to come up with some kind of broad estimate? We'll never have a hard number. I can understand that. But are we going to get some kind of an estimate as to what number of cases are at least possibly ET? That's a key question. It's a tough one to answer, I understand, but we got to at least try, it seems to me.
Well, when they're investigating, whether it be Blue Book or MUFON or any other organization, for the most part, as far as you can go, is that it's an unknown. We just don't know what it is, which is saying a lot, especially if you're talking about the Navy or a case like Nimitz, where Elizondo feels that there was an aircraft that was exhibiting a propulsion system that we are not familiar with and was able to achieve, the sort of performance that's very, very, very far beyond our capabilities.
Yeah. Witnessed and backed up by radar data, physical evidence.
By radar data, others have talked about there is very sophisticated radar in the area. So that's about as far as we can go. We don't know what it is. It would be really difficult. You'd have to get a chunk of it. It'd be difficult to prove that it is extraterrestrial necessarily. So that's the hard part. So we're going to get what are the true unknowns. And that'll be the interesting part. And then it'll take a long time to figure out if ever, what are these unknowns? I think that there's also the perspective of the military. Lou talks to this, but Nick Pope has talked to this quite a bit too, is that Nick Pope, kind of says, in the military, we didn't care who was behind the reel. What we cared about was, is this a threat and how do we harness that technology? And those were the main things from a defense perspective that the military is thinking of.
Well, that's almost a tacit admission that they believe that these are ET, because it's not any technology that's available on Earth. If they're looking to harness it, well, they're not harnessing it from China. They're not harnessing it from Russia. We don't have it.
But
Where's
it could
it coming
be something from the future. It could be something multidimensional, something that we don't even have an answer for. And what I find interesting is talking with scientists. Scientists are very uncomfortable with the idea of ET, and I think it's mostly because of the giggle factor. But scientists are more actually prone to be comfortable with the multidimensional idea, just because multiple dimensions are such a big thing in science these days, and there's so many mainstream scientists that are getting big names for being able to show mathematically that other dimensions most likely exist. So that's kind of a darling theory, actually, I'm seeing in the science community for this stuff.
Yeah, Alejandro, I wanted to bring to your attention something that you said that was absolutely correct, and that is in the UFO community, and I'm not going to mention names, has nothing to do with that, but just in general, it's really important, like you said, regarding, the best and worst kind of journalism. The best kind of journalism is just good old-fashioned journalism, where people actually do public reporting of whatever topic it is that they're covering. They highlight what appears to be facts. They check their sources. Very simple. Maybe do some edit changes to their article or whatever. Normal stuff. But when they're not following those normal guidelines, they can be denounced very quickly, meaning the individual that is spreading disinformation, it turns from news to disinformation very quickly. Because when journalists or people that feel they're journalists, or whatever it is they call themselves, writers or researchers or investigators of whatever, the critique of their articles or pseudo articles can be a nightmare for them, and also a nightmare for the people when they publish something online when there's a range of errors in it. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you very much for having touched upon that. Wanted to go on to the next topic, and that is, by the way, I did want to mention something because I didn't get a chance to backtrack and say this. So let me just bring up something else here, and that is you're going to have an interview this weekend. You already had an interview last year with Lou Elizondo, but you're going to have an interview this weekend with Lou Elizondo by Skype on Open Minds Radio podcast. Everybody, please go to that. I can't imagine anybody not listening to that. It's on openminds.tv. It'll be an audio interview. That is going to be a really important interview for everybody to listen to. You may have covered it a little bit, but Alejandro, do you mind just mentioning a little bit about that so we can emphasize that to our listeners, how important that interview is?
Yeah, I think right now it's really important. We haven't heard from Lou for a while in an interview. The last time actually we heard from him was in Alabama with the Scientific Coalition for, now it's called UAP research. But so luckily we heard from him there. But otherwise, it's been a while because they've kind of been on this hiatus. They're on this hold. They've been shooting the History Channel show, and the promotion hasn't started up for that. So, and with all of this other news that's come, I think it's going to be really important. And now Lou does like to share information. I think today that piece of information I got was an example. He is really excited to say, hey, I know that Washington Post story came out, but it's not the full story. People, don't freak out. There is going to be some public disclosure when it comes to this Navy UFO reporting. So clarifying that, speaking to the DD 1910, there were people that were questioning, hey, there's no signature on this line where there's normally a signature. And George Knapp brought out, well, that's because there's a stamp, and the stamp served the purpose that the signature would. Some people are satisfied with that. Some aren't. But we can ask, Lou about some of those things. But we'll get more information about what's in the show. How much of an influence To the Stars had on this whole Navy thing? How much do they really know about what's going on in do they have, what is their involvement? And I think that what people need to really listen for in this interview is we have evidence, not only through the briefings, but also through this Navy news and some of what they've told us recently, Chris Mellon and others, that they are really plugged in with the legislature, with military leadership. So they're very plugged in when it comes to this topic. And that makes them kind of leaders on this topic when it comes to those arenas. So that makes what these guys have to say really important, because then we get more insight into how much influence they're having and what sort of future we can be looking forward to, even when it comes to the government in this topic. I mean, is the Air Force going to start some guidelines? Who else is interested, and who else is asking for information? I think all of this is going to be really interesting.
Okay, yeah. Alejandro, thank you for bringing that up. I really appreciate it. We want to talk about your important work with the SCU. That is the Scientific Coalition for Ufology. I'll be sure to include that link in the chat room and also mention it after you finish talking. You are on the board in respect of public relations, isn't that correct? And also, could you please just let us know a little bit about your time with SCU?
Right. So the SCU is the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies, unidentified aerial phenomena. And the whole point is to kind of do science and interface with scientists regarding this topic. And I think that's really important. I've always said, and my interest in this arena has always been, that there's space for a UFOs of SETI. Some of you will remember back in the 90s or so, SETI was not a mainstream thing. They were made fun of too, just like the UFO people. Literally, they were right with us. Oh, the people looking for aliens. And they've done a great job where they've turned things around, where now SETI, the Search for Extraterrestrial Intelligence, which is an institute, but also a kind of a topic, is the main thing. I mean, NASA is admitting that, we're alien hunters, that and whatever SETI does makes news, and they're alien hunting. They're looking for intelligent extraterrestrial civilizations that are out there. So if they could do it, there needs to be an organization on the UFO end to do that, because it's doable. MUFON was what a lot of us hoped that would be. And I used to be the PR guy for MUFON. And back in those days, that's where we were moving towards. But it came a bit more populist, and it was difficult, because back then when I was doing this and we were more science oriented, we would always get, why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? And why don't you do that? And I would have to say, we need to focus on what we do best. There's plenty of other people that focus on the other things. But MUFON now has kind of taken more of a broader idea of things. They're covering more topics, and they're not focused necessarily strictly on science. So some of the people who were science oriented have left MUFON and created this SCU, and I've been working with them. And they've been great at not only focusing on science, making a place where papers can be submitted, research papers, and they can be peer reviewed. And then they've also done a great job in reaching out globally to scientists who are interested in this topic. They've got a great membership. We've got great partnerships. And now, slowly, because it takes time, we've got some research papers coming out. This group first got together researching the Aguadilla case from 2009, I think that was, and they put out the paper on that. The latest paper they've done is a Nimitz encounter research paper, which is the only scientific analysis we have on the Nimitz case, because we don't know what ATIP did. We don't have those papers, so we've got some amazing information regarding the scientific analysis of the maneuvers that these things had done. So I'm really excited about the group and moving forward. I'm an advisor of the board right now for media, so I kind of help them with media outreach, and because I think that's an important part. What SETI did was twofold. They studied the science, they got involvement from scientists, so they embedded themselves in the science community, but they also pretty much, it seems like these days especially, they don't say no to any PR opportunity. So they're out there talking with people, sharing information. Seth Shostak, even though he's a UFO skeptic and he frustrates people, he's an excellent speaker. I mean, he convinces people, look, guys, there are aliens out there, and he's humorous and witty when he does it. I think that that's a great model for us to move towards, and it shows us we can get there. We can make this, a topic that is taken more seriously, and I think that's happening.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up all that, Alejandro. I wanted to mention to you that we have interviewed Rich Hoffman, who's on the board of SCU. I know you know him very well. And he covered a few things you mentioned. One thing about SCU is they're very serious about their papers. You mentioned the Agua Dia Puerto Rico report, I believe is what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
That was just updated on the 28th of August 2018. Wanted to mention everybody, that report is absolutely fascinating. It's a little blurb I want to read on it is since the first release of the 2013 Agua Dia Puerto Rico UAP report on August 10th, 2015, there have been various inputs from news sources, various blogs, and social media sites related to the content of the video and our report. The only review that we have received to date is from the French aeronautical group Sigma 3AF, and that was only an initial review of the report. They have indicated that a full review of the report should be available in December on their website. We will place a link to their site once such a review is completed. If people go to these kinds of reports that SCU has, and these reports are massive, and they are almost at forensic level regarding how definitive they are, and really something to be proud of. We went over these reports in great detail with Rich Hoffman in our last spring MegaCon panel, where we talked about current events. And I'm going to go and drop the link in the chat room in just a moment. You would go to explorescu.org. So that's explorescu.org. And then I recommend going to hit / and then papers. And you will find any manner of paperwork there, documents and videos, scientific findings regarding a major U.S. Navy encounter with, one starts off with, another one is science-based UFO research organization makes public statement, estimates of optical power output at 6 cases of an unexplained, it goes on, making UFOs make sense, ufology, science, and so forth, Stephenville Lights, spherical unidentified anomalous phenomena. I could go on and on. This is a massive archive of by SCU regarding various papers for fascinating reading. Wanted to move on to the next topic here, and
if I could just mention one thing real quickly, that Sigma 3AF, that's a big deal in France. That is their astronomical and aeronautical association. So it's made up of engineers and technicians. So this is not a UFO group out there. This is a serious engineering aerospace organization that it's taking on, and it's taking them a long time because they're going page by page to review and give feedback. And so far, they've been very impressed with the report.
Yes, and by the way, just wanted to tell you, we love it when you interrupt because we always love what you have to say. So please interrupt me. We're here for you. So at any time I'm talking,
you never say that to me, Chant. You never say that to me.
Different. But Alejandro, by all means, please do interrupt me. This interview is all about you. Now, I wanted to bring up something that Frank wanted to talk about regarding Researcher of the Year. Frank, go ahead, take it.
Yes. Now, at the risk of hurting Dave's chances, I want to say this. I think Dave Beatty should be the UFO Researcher of the Year, and if he's not Alejandro, I will never speak to you again.
Oh,
you just completely ruined every chance. No, I'm kidding. Dave Beatty, of course, I'm sure you've had him on the show.
Oh, yeah.
His video of the Nimitz encounter is extraordinary. The work he put towards it, the professionalism that he put into it. I mean, this video, we've never seen something like this before, I think, in the UFO community. So I completely understand why you would say that. He's certainly deserving. I'm not the boss, so it's not going to be my final decision. But and it's always so hard to decide. But I can see why you would say that, and he certainly would be worthy of it.
Okay, well, Frank, you wanted to bring it up. I thought perhaps you would talk more about it. Didn't you want to rant a little bit about that topic?
Well, it's not just the movie itself, but it's all the research that he's done. And what he's done is kind of created an atmosphere outside TTSA where witnesses feel comfortable coming forward and speaking to him.
That's a really good point.
I mean, he's made a film and he's done the research to back it up, and there's more on the way.
Yeah. No, I agree. He keeps getting more and more witnesses out. He is on top of this Nimitz thing, hardcore, which is so important because it's an absolutely amazing case. And according to Elizondo, even on this History Channel show, there are more, even better cases that ATIP will be exploring on the show and that the ATIP looked into. So I guess we're going to have even better ones coming up. So Dave's going to have to do quite a few more videos.
And you had mentioned, Chant, it didn't come up when we were talking about your conversation with Paul Dean, but you had mentioned to me that there are some East Coast pilots in more recent cases that are chomping at the bit to come out and speak.
Yes. It's funny. Thank you for talking about that, Frank, but you will never believe who's talking to me now. Paul Dean, he's wanted to thank Alejandro for having been so kind and complimentary towards him. And Frank, I'm not meaning to sidestep your question or your comment here, but Alejandro, my personal, the person I would like to volunteer as Researcher of the Year is Paul Dean. If he needs to be recognized, I say that not to you, but just in general to everybody in ufology. This person works very quietly. He's probably one of the quietest people I've ever met in ufology. And all he does literally day and night is research the topic of ufology and brings us mountains of information to pour over regarding documents and FOIA requests. And the other individual is a lovely person. We just interviewed him, and that is Keith Basterfield.
Keith's awesome.
I was going to say
Yes.
that. Yeah, Paul Dean kind of has a buddy now in the field, Keith Basterfield, who's also done some amazing work. You know what? And Keith, I only first talked with just recently, and little does he know, I visit his website often. Now he knows that. I told him. But yeah, Paul and Keith are absolutely incredible. I think what's really amazing, and Paul is certainly, he's not shy to share this information. He's not quiet when you get him on the phone, but as far as the internet-wise, he certainly is.
Yeah. Keith really cranks him out. Keith,
Keith has been
really productive.
Paul Dean gets in those modes too. And what's really interesting is these guys, Paul says this, and I agree with him, that they're the best at this. There's nobody getting these documents and getting to the root and, really digging like these guys are. And they are, Paul, it's funny because I say, the best guy getting the U.S. documents is Paul Dean, and he doesn't even live in the U.S. And it's true. They're extraordinary.
We talked to him about it at length last year, and he just developed a knack for it. Mm-hmm. It's a weird kind of thing, but he's a very productive guy. And another guy who's really productive is you. And it's like, how do you manage everything that you do? How do you do it?
Yeah. Thank you for saying that, Frank. That is so true about Alejandro.
Thank you for saying that. And I guess mostly I'm data driven. So I'm driven by the stories and the news, and it is, especially hard right now just because there's so much coming out. So I want to keep on top of stuff. And my passion is to share information. That's what I do. And so it's hard for me when, there's information that comes out I know people don't have, and I want to get it to people as soon as possible. Or maybe like today when questions arise, and I know I've got a contact who can answer some of these questions. So I want to get that information out there to help us keep moving forward. And it does get in the way of some of the other things that I do. Right now, I'm prioritizing the whole UFO thing, and I hope that works out for me. By the way, sorry to plug, and it's not to beg for money, but if you go to my Patreon site, if people want to help support me, that's a great way to do it. I do share exclusive stuff. So David Marler, you guys, if you haven't had him on your show, you got to have him. He's
working it. We're working it.
I was just talking
he's
to
amazing.
Him the other day. Yeah. He was in Arizona doing a talk. Go ahead.
Exactly. Yes. He was just in Phoenix. So he's a good buddy of mine. And I recorded him, asked him what's his favorite triangle case. He's known for he wrote a book about that. and then asked him his thoughts on this Navy stuff. And so I shared that as something special for my Patreons. And it's as low as like $1 a month, but that goes a long way for helping me keep me able to prioritize this stuff, because I'm trying to do that because I'd rather, keep doing this because there's so much information to share. And luckily, I've been in this long enough that I have some insight and perspective that others don't. So I think that I have a lot of relevant information to share to people.
Yeah, and I know the website you're talking about. I just want to tell everybody, please do pitch $1. Just go to the website and give a little bit, because it's not like he's buying an island here. Nobody's getting rich off.
Yeah,
of
he
this.
already
I know
owns
the
an
three of
island.
us
He told me
talking
all about it before the show. He already
and
has
you're going
one.
to get something. It's not like, I'm just saying, hey, donate money. I'm saying, hey, for a buck, you're going to get a lot of great content.
Well, exactly. That's what I was about to say. Before we talk about the URL to the website, I want to tell everybody that it is worth your time, because you're getting content that you would not normally get anywhere else. So it's exclusive stuff. And how would you spell the name of that website, just so everybody knows which one it is?
Patreon is patreon.com, and then you can just look up Alejandro Rojas. You'll find me there. But you can also go to my website, which is alejandrotrojas.com, and you can find a link there. So alejandrotrojas.com.
Right. And I actually will be sharing your website in the chat room in a moment, and the Patreon. So I'll do that now.
And all the Open Minds web presences, they're yours as well?
Yeah, so essentially with Open Minds, it's kind of gone. I mean, we used to have a staff where we were putting out videos and everything, but over time, that's kind of gone away. So I'm maintaining it. It's almost like an archival site at this time. I mean, I still do Open Minds UFO Radio that I post there, and I still post, summaries of the stories I write elsewhere, and then link to those stories. So Open Minds is still around, and there's so much great information because we've had so many great contributors over the years. So I maintain it still. So it still exists. It's still a thing. And of course we have a big website and everything. So yeah, it's still up there and running, but I also am, it's something I'm maintaining while I do other things.
Okay, good. Yeah, and I did also share those two links. I've kind of shared them repeatedly anyway, the alejandrotrojas.com. Now, I just want to spell that for people. It's ALEJANDROTROJAS.com. And it looks like my friend Rodrigo Vieira is in here tonight. Okay, one I wanted to let our listeners hear are some questions that I got over the past 2 days. When everybody heard I was interviewing Alejandro, I got overwhelmed with a ton of questions. So I have a grocery list full of them, and wanted to start off with the first one. Are you ready, Alejandro?
I'm ready, and I don't mind the tough one. So if someone's being critical and they're like, hey, why'd you say this or that? Bring it on, because I don't mind tackling.
I have the toughest one right here.
Okay.
Okay, just one sec. Let me go ahead and stop this beeping here. Sorry about that. That was me. Jeff Krause, who knows you very well, and Mark D'Antonio, they got together today, and they have a question for you. Jeff wants to know where the $5 is that he lent you in 2014. He says he wants it back.
Jeff who?
Jeff Krause. California, MUFON.
Jeff is a joker, so I know he's only kidding. But just because he made such a funny comment, I'll pay him $5 for it next time I see him. I think I will be seeing him soon, and also because I'll be speaking at Alien Con this summer, and I think he said he'll be there. So I'll give you your $5 then, Mr. Krause.
Well, Mark D'Antonio said that I just spoke to him today, by the way, and he says he wants to know from Jeff Krause, where's the $5 that he lent to Jeff to lend to you? And and Jeff also said that you can pay him back in beer. He did say that. So you're aware.
Can you even get a beer for $5 anymore?
Right. Okay. So Shane Hurd, who is a field investigator with Phoenix MUFON here in Arizona, was a fabulous person. And I actually had the opportunity to spend time. I actually had dinner with he and his beautiful wife, Donna, after the Phoenix Lights event at that Dr. Linkatai had here in Phoenix, Arizona. It was a really wonderful event. I spent 7 hours with the Saucer Man, my equipment camera guy, covering that event. And anyway, wanted to let you know his question. He said, has he ever seen a UFO or had an experience? And is that what got him into the topic? That is his question for you.
Okay. Yeah, I love Shane too. Hello, buddy. Good to hear from you. Yeah, and I don't think I've talked to him about my sightings, but I have had a couple of sightings. They're not what got me into this. And it's a great question because the vast majority of people who have a passion for this field, I think, have had sightings, but not me. In fact, I was an investigator for several years before I had my first sighting. And where did I have it? Funny enough, at a place called the UFO Watchtower. So this is a place in Colorado. It's in the San Luis Valley, where I do have roots. My family had come from there. A lot of weird stuff goes on there. Chris O'Brien has a book on the weirdness out there. He used to be based out there. But I decided, you know what? I got to visit this place. And so me and my sister and a buddy and his girlfriend all decided to go camping out there at this UFO Watchtower. Since, I ended up, being like the MC for this yearly thing they did there. And because when we got there, I just really hit it off with the lady who was running it. She was such a cool lady. So we were just talking and talking and talking, and we weren't outside looking. And my sister said, I think there's a satellite out here, but she was really excited. So I could tell, oh, she must see something interesting. So I ran out there, and sure enough, there was this really bright light. To the east of us in the San Luis Valley. We are directly east of the Sand Dunes, the Sand Dunes National Park there. And the Sand Dunes is up against the Sangre de Cristo mountain range. And above the mountain range, at about 30%, it was dusk. There was a really bright light. It was dusk, so it's not like it was dark enough where you could see, let's say, the ISS or something like that. And it was moving across above the hills. It was not blinking. It was just a solid light. It was moving. And then when it got about directly east of us, it made these weird movements. Everybody saw something different. I thought it was kind of like blinking, like the light was going on and off and then fading off, and also making this jerky movement. Others thought it started changing direction and some of this other stuff before it faded out. So yeah, that was weird. That was my first sighting. And then this is what's weird. So we're all excited and we're talking about it. And as we're talking, it gets darker and darker because it was dusk. Then it's pitch dark out. And sure enough, I turn around, and in the northeast and the northwest, there was a satellite. Well, let's see. I was facing west. So this was in the southwest and the northwest. There were two satellites. And they were both at about the same distance coming towards us. And they crossed. This is so weird. They crossed in the sky right above where we had our sighting. And I call them satellites because they were just slow, moving in one direction. So that was really cool. It was kind of neat because at the San Diego Comic-Con for the Blue Book, Project Blue Book television show, they had like this secret base set up. And they had guys in there sketching out people's UFO cases. So I was able to get them to sketch my sighting. And in fact, I did this on, I think, a Facebook Live or a Instagram Live where I went through that and then showed people my thing. So you can go on there and check that out.
Okay, yes. And thank you so much for going over that. Two things I wanted to mention before I ask you the next question. And that is Chase Kletzky is here with us tonight, which is wonderful. And she was also very happy that you were going over the females involved in ufology that are going to be representing all of us at the UFO Congress, because you have quite a few, I think probably more than any other convention possibly. And then also the other thing is that Rich Hoffman of SCU is here with us tonight, and he said hello. And it's always nice to see Rich. He's such a wonderful person. We really enjoy his company very much.
This feels like an episode of This Is Your Life, because you're talking about all of my favorite people, some of my best buds out there.
It's so funny. Rich Hoffman is hilarious. People may think he's just serious all the time and myopically focused on stuff, and he is. He's laser sharp, and you can't get anything by him, just like you. But what's so very funny about him is he's just got such an intense sense of humor. We just thoroughly enjoy spending time with him whenever we get an opportunity to do so. Moving on to the next question, that is Tom Whitmore. And now, just so you know, and I don't mean to sound like your mother here, Alejandro, but I do have to warn you there are quite a few questions. So, if you feel like you can do this with brevity, that would be great. So that's my warning to you.
Gotcha.
All right, Tom Whitmore. The question would be, do you think that Grant Cameron will actually release the interview? What could be so explosive about MJ-12 and the deep state involvement in UFOs? And what do you think will happen, if at all? That's exactly what he said. So you can take that as you will. Do you want me to reread it to you?
No,
okay.
Yeah, I get it. So, Tom Whitmore is great. He's a board member of MUFON.
Yes.
I do know him well. And you know what? I don't pay attention to any of that. And here's why. And first of all, I love Grant Cameron to get death. He's an important person in this field. His presidential UFO site is so important. But lately, I don't know. It's just that I don't feel like he's going down some rabbit holes that aren't being very productive. I don't think so. I think that it would be best for him to kind of come around and start to look into some areas that'll be a little more fruitful. Because first of all, I'm one of these people, and I've done a lot of research on this, and people can see it. The MJ-12 documents are not real. I mean, they were. People don't talk about this, but the very first MJ-12 was mentioned is in a document that was created by Richard Doty, and Richard Doty says that was fake, that he made up the whole thing.
They're Fozy fakes. I will say this about them. I think they're useful reading. They were actually very helpful to me when I started on this. They're very well researched.
Well, what's interesting about that, it's because they were written, and this is what's so suspicious. So these very first documents were created by Richard Doty. Then they got a lot better. And it turned out that it was William Moore, an author, who joined him and started sharing these fake documents. Richard Moore, of course, or William Moore, worked with Stanton Friedman. And surprisingly, a lot of the research that Stanton Friedman and Bill Moore had done ended up in these documents.
Sure.
So that's why it's great research, because it is great research from Stanton Friedman, and that ended up in some of these. But yeah, so I don't put much into that. We haven't seen much. There was supposed to be this big news from Joe Firmage that has turned out to be false news. It seems like he's even admitted this position he claimed to have with the National Space Council doesn't even exist. So, and I found that just kind of by happenstance. So there hasn't been anything, I don't think, fruitful coming from that. I don't believe the MJ-12 documents are real. I don't think we're going to receive anything from that, and that's going to be of use personally. So I'm not really paying attention to it.
Yeah, and I'm glad you did bring that up, because I was searching everywhere.
I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt again, Chant, but doubling back, if they're not real, they still came from somewhere. I don't believe that Grant ginned them up and is running around suggesting that he's got them. I think somebody did give them to him. And don't you think that it's important that we know about that kind of thing? That the UFO researchers might be getting snowed or played a little bit. And it's good to know about this stuff. It's good to keep your eye on this sort of thing.
It's very important. And I've been trying to share the roots of where this information comes from and the roots of where this data actually is sourced from. But nobody seems to pay attention, because it's kind of more fun to believe in the mystery or the mythology, it seems like. So now I'm sounding like George Knapp, but unfortunately, I agree with you, and I've been trying to share this message, and I'm not afraid to share this message, at any time, even though I'm sure there's listeners that are very frustrated by those comments, but that's what I found in my years of research.
Right. So let's just talk about Joe Firmage for a second. By the way, I don't know if it's Joe Firmage, like Target to Target, or how to pronounce that name, but I'll just say Joe Firmage for now. Evidently, Grant posted something interesting recently. We all saw it. It was huge in the topic of ufology for some and not for others. What that picture was that he posted was the National Space Council indicating allegedly that Joe Firmage had joined it. You can go ahead and say in what manner if you wish, Alejandro. That would be great. And then I did want to mention to everybody, when I did my research on this topic, I think it was Bruce Fenton that came up with information and research he had done, finding out that there was no such position that Joe Firmage held. Now, when I also did research looking for anything that Grant had to say about this topic, because as you know, Alejandro, like yourself, you and he get comments prolific amount of comments from people asking you questions, demanding answers. And there were questions in the hundreds to Grant. And everything I sifted through, I only found a few comments from Grant about this. And here it goes. The Real Aussie 4438, he asked at White House UFO, which is Grant Cameron, where's the proof of this? Meaning Joe Firmage, the thing he just posted on it, the picture he did about the National Space Council and Joe Firmage being involved with that. You can go ahead and talk about that position, if you don't mind, Alejandro, in a moment. And White House UFO being Grant Cameron said, stand by when he was asked about it. And then he was asked again, and he said, Grant Cameron said, I am watching just like you. So he never once committed to saying he believed what he posted. He just said that people need to stand by, and he is watching just like you. Those two things, that's all I found.
The position, I definitely do not want to disparage any of these people because I do respect them. Joe Firmage, for instance, he's another guy who made a lot of money, I think, in the Silicon Valley, and he decided to put it towards UFO research, which is great. I think that's wonderful. But as far as, unfortunately, this press release went out on his website that said he was going to be president of the National Space Council. Now, I also cover space. So I, luckily get to go to NASA facilities, interview astronauts, this sort of thing. So I'm very familiar with the National Space Council, which is something that President Trump had restarted. It was something that was created way back in the past, essentially this council that advises the president regarding space. And Trump created that again. And you can go to the website, and it's on NASA's website where you can see all of the members. You referred to earlier, Frank, this article on Politico, where one of these gentlemen from the House Space Committee had made a comment on UFOs. Also present in that conversation was one of the members of the National Space Council. So, they're out there. It's an organization that's out there, but and it's a big time. I mean, for goodness sakes, they advise the president. They work directly with NASA leadership. So this is a very public thing. They had made a comment, I know, that they don't even know who Joe Firmage is, which makes sense. So maybe Joe is trying to work with them somehow, and that would be great. And maybe he's trying to get them into UFOs or something like that.
It's unfortunate. I think what happened here is Grant is taking information apparently he got directly from Firmage, or maybe somebody very close to him. He went with it. If Firmage was the ultimate source on this announcement, that proved to be crazy. But if the source gives you something and you go with it and it turns out to be terrible, but it's Joe Firmage, you know what I mean?
There's poor information that buttresses all of this in the first place. And I think that's the issue, is that you can connect dots, but if you're connecting dots by speculation and assumption, it's going to be a very weak case. Understood.
But if Firmage releases something like this, no matter how bogus it is, isn't the fact that Firmage releases it news? I think it is.
Well, I don't think so. Personally,
you don't think so? I mean, I'm not saying it's the biggest story in the world, but it's coming from Firmage. He's saying it. Like I said, I don't think it's a big story, but
here's why I didn't cover it. I didn't think it was that big of news because I hadn't been hearing things from other mainstream, more traditional routes, which you would. I mean, it's a big deal.
Well, Grant was saying that was going to happen, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, not even close. Just the opposite. They even said, we don't even know who this guy is. It sounds like more like he's trying to, introduce them to some of the stuff that he's working on, which is kind of more along of the lines of what ATIP is working on. And he wants like our TTSA. So he wants to be like TTSA, and he wants to, get involved with some of these mainstream organizations, and good luck to him. But, there has been practically no headway made in that arena. And lots of these are kind of like shadow boxing. It's like it's all of this may happen or that may happen. And, according to this person and hearsay and rumor, whereas it's not, direct hard facts that you can work with. And that's why I haven't worked in that arena, because sure enough, it all falls apart. And people think, I'm being kind of a jerk, but I'm not. It's just that there hasn't been anything fruitful from that front as far as, real hard data. And so, and I could be proven wrong, and I could have been, Firmage might have been announced, and then I would have, lost out because I could have been ahead of the story. But unfortunately, what I suspected was that the same thing that we keep hearing from this side of things is not true, and it's not. This is a side of things that is just really kind of going down, I think, the wrong path.
It's a sad story for sure. I got to disagree with you a little bit in that it is a story, maybe not a huge story, but it's a little bit of a story.
Wanted to read a little bit about Bruce Fenton doing some research on this, and he found out that regarding the National Space Council and Joe Firmage allegedly putting out, saying that he's the president of the National Space Council. Thea McDonald, director of communications for the National Space Council from the White House, allegedly wrote back a letter saying to Bruce Fenton, "Hello, this information is false. This is not an official announcement from the National Space Council, and we are unfamiliar with this individual. Thank you, Thea." Just as Alejandro said. We're giving it airtime, but also it's important. Two things. Alejandro is right when he said this is really a non-news topic. It is. It's not really news. But at the same time, weirdly, we have to cover it because even though it's not real, it's important for folks in the ufology community to know, and folks outside of the ufology community, to know that this is not real news. Okay, so do you agree, Alejandro?
I mean, for the most part, I didn't feel it was news because I was afraid that it would fall apart like it did, and it did. And so I don't want to disparage anybody or point out, kind of the follies behind the scenes that are happening. But I want to tell people.
Yeah, go ahead.
That there is legit stuff. If you really have an interest in consciousness, how this may be happening, what might be going on that way, who's researching it, who's doing serious research at major institutions, you need to follow people like Hal Puthoff or Eric Davis or Gary Nolan or Jacques Vallée or the SSE, a whole organization of scientists that look into this sort of things. These are credible scientists who are really making headway and doing real work. These are the people that you need to pay attention to if you're interested in that sort of thing.
You're right, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, and thank you for saying that. You're turning, lemons into lemonade there by saying that, so I appreciate that. Now I have another question for you, and this is from Rodrigo Vieira. And Rodrigo, I always say your last name wrong. I am so sorry. But anyway, I wanted to ask his question. So it's after, okay, I see what he's saying here. He's saying, after you spoke with Elizondo, Dr. Davis, and Dr. Nolan, do you think, A, the U.S. government is in possession of alien artifacts, but it is so compartmentalized that none of them are aware of it? And then, do you want me to just read the whole thing and then I can tell you again the first one? Okay, B, government crash retrievals, alien artifacts, and Bob Lazar are all fantasy. I guess that's sort of, he wants to know if that's, but do you commiserate with that? But the first one is A, the U.S. government is in possession of alien artifacts, but it is so compartmentalized that none of them are aware of it. Do you agree with that?
I think that is completely possible. I think that, one of the theories, for example, everything is, siloed. You hear this a lot. The Navy doesn't know what the Air Force is doing. The Air Force doesn't know what, the DOD is doing. Everything is very siloed. All of these different departments that are doing all this work are doing it very independently. So if the Navy is collecting data, often they might not be sharing it with the Air Force. Might not be where the information is going to, where it's being analyzed and coalesced and everything. So that would be entirely possible. Situations like Roswell, I think that, if we look at, I just posted something from John Alexander today. He spoke at Phoenix MUFON a few months ago, and he talks about how the government works and how this siloing happens. And I think that this is incredibly insightful and important because let's say Roswell happened and something really strange did crash there. Well, if somebody, up the line decided, hey, this is embarrassing, I want it to go away, they could burn the files, lose the materials, and it's over. It's done. It's lost to history. And in fact, I think it mostly has. I don't think we're ever going to find, any of these records or anything. That it's just gone. If somebody wants them gone, it's going to be gone. So I think he's entirely correct that there could be something that people are sitting on. It could be possible. For instance, George Knapp went to Russia and he received some materials that they said that they analyzed and were mysterious and could be from a UFO. They sat in a museum in Las Vegas for a period of time, and I'm not even sure where they are right now. So something that may be something significant, just nobody's taking the time to take it seriously. So it's just coasting around or sitting in a closet or something. I think that's entirely possible. That's a really interesting observation.
Okay. And do you feel that what you just said? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So you covered all of that. I'm sorry. My mic went out while you were talking. And I would just want to make sure you covered from A to B on that.
Yeah, I didn't talk about the crashes. I am
okay. Let me mention B again though, so you don't miss any part of it. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it's only just so you can hear the question again. B, government crash retrievals, alien artifacts, and Bob Lazar are all fantasy. Go ahead.
I don't know that they're all fantasy. I'm not afraid to say I don't know, and I think that's really important. To say I don't know, because it's certainly that they're possible. And my scale my probability scale changes, on a regular basis. So, for instance, I'm still highly skeptical of crashes. Period. Overall, I just am skeptical that could even happen or be hidden. However, my scale isn't as far to the left as it usually is because, like he mentioned, I interviewed Eric Davis this week, and Eric Davis is very convinced that there have been crashes before, and there are even possibly even projects to receive crashes. So it's possible. I don't think we have
just
very
to jump
good evidence for it.
There are always crash retrieval programs going on because there's such a huge infrastructure built up. The Foreign Technology Division's been functioning since World War I. We're always looking for crashed non-U.S. aircraft.
Right. So
that mechanism does exist. That mechanism does exist. Now, whether some of those crashes retrieved are UFOs, that's the issue that we're interested in. But we're definitely always out there looking. So a Soviet craft comes down, something like that. Well, back in the day, Russian craft, Chinese craft. Yeah, we want it. There's no question about that.
But I guess to his other point, as much as I am a humongous fan of George Knapp's, I'm highly skeptical of Bob Lazar. We've got one person who's got an anecdotal story with nothing to back it up. And unfortunately, some of the things that people think are smoking guns are not. Element 115 was not introduced by Bob Lazar. This is something science has been talking about way before Bob Lazar was born. Scientists were talking about Element 115 and what it could potentially be. He's not the guy who came up with that. So I'm huge friends with Jeremy Corbell too, and we debate this all of the time. But it's possible.
I'm going to debate with you a little bit too. Because I think George has been exceptionally careful in what he's backed up as far as what Bob said. He's convinced that Bob worked there. And frankly, I am too, that he actually did work there.
At Area 51?
Yes.
I'm not at all.
Okay. Yeah, I'm convinced he at least worked there. Have you ever seen Bob's original documentary, the one that he himself made with his friend Gene? I think that's really interesting. And my own opinion is that the second part of his documentary where he talked about that briefing that he got and was fed all the information about Zeta Reticuli and that we know where the ETs are coming from and so on and so forth, I think that's actually true. I think he was fed that information. But what I think, this is my theory now, what I think was the first part of what he said that he saw was in fact that entire briefing. He just segmented that part out, said, I experienced all this firsthand, but in reality, that entire episode, that entire, what he recounted in that documentary was in fact probably an Afosi briefing. and he was played a little bit. That's what I think. That's just my
That's
theory.
entirely possible. I did a lecture actually where I compared Bob Lazar to Doty, and I was like, "Is this another UFO disinformation scandal?" And I'm not saying it is. I don't know that. It's
That's
certainly
what
a
I think. I mean,
possibility.
obviously, yeah, I don't know that for sure either, but at least that's my working theory.
I think
George
that's
has
a good
checked it
theory.
out. I agree with him that he did work there. That description of the hand scanner, Chant actually did a great job. That hand scanner that he had described was actually manufactured specifically for the Office of Naval Intelligence, which Bob had said all along was his employer.
Yeah,
No, I
since
think
then,
that's very
people
telling.
have shared with me images from television shows that have shown the exact scanner too. I mean, it looks exactly like what Lazar had talked about. So I'd have to look that up. The other situation I have is he said he was driven from Area 51 to this S4 place at Papoose Lake. He's told us the general area where that was. There are no roads there. You can see roads. It's a dry desert. You can see roads that are ancient there, but there's no roads that go from Area 51 to where he alleges S4 was. Could be he told the wrong place on purpose so that, people wouldn't find out or something. But I don't know. There's a lot of could-haves, should-haves, but I just don't think it's certainly not enough evidence there for me to hang my hat on. The reason that I give it the most, it's still in my gray basket is because of George Knapp. George Knapp has told me there is just information he has received from anonymous sources that really lend credibility to the case, but he cannot share that information. So I just don't have the information George has.
Thank you very much for saying all that. Hope we're still on topic because I got a bunch of more questions from other people, which I will not bring up because there's not enough time. And I didn't have a chance to focus in on what you guys were saying. But Terry Tavernetti, the polygraph examiner and former LA cop, put Lazar through 4 tests and concluded that there was no attempt to deceive. He felt there was credibility regarding what Lazar had to say. He sent the results to 3 polyographers and found all the results truthful. Now, it sounds like I'm defending him. I'm not. I'm just saying that is a fact regarding Terry Tavernetti.
You're bringing up another piece of credible evidence, and so it's valid. Yes. That's relevant information.
Right, okay. Thank you. And wanted to bring up some more interesting stuff here. There's an individual that does not want to name himself, but he's been involved in ufology for half a century. And he's very well connected. He knew a lot of important people like Coral Lorenzen, J. Allen Hynek, Gray Barker. He goes back that far. He wanted to ask you why the changes at IUFOC ownership location. How did you acquire it or inherit it?
I didn't. I never have. So here's how that evolution went. The Browns owned it. They're a great family. In fact, they helped Terry Brown, who was the patriarch of the family. She actually ran it, and she helped us at MUFON in Colorado when I was working there, and when we started doing Colorado symposiums for MUFON out there. So she was a great help. She really helped me understand the business of running things like that. So in 2010, when the owner of Open Minds was out, the Browns were essentially getting ready to sell or close down shop. So my boss, who owned Open Minds, bought the conference and hired me to help run it, and also to run this news website, Open Minds. So I had an incredible opportunity to do that. So I did. But as time went on, and as he got older and essentially wanted to retire and started winding down Open Minds, which is, everybody says this field, you do not make money, it costs money. And he spent a lot of money on this field to keep to have our excellent magazine and our great website and everything going. But he wanted to also unload the conference. And so the love of my life, Karen Brard, she's really into the topic. She had been there to help me with the conference for all those years here in Arizona. And she decided, hey, I want to buy it. And I was shocked. I thought I was finally free of this crazy conference. But and that didn't turn out to be the case. I'm kidding. It is fun. But so she decided to purchase the conference, and she did. So she is now the owner, Karen Brard. And so she is the runner, and I'm her employee. So I help run I do shipping. I do customer service. So I help her with a lot of different things related to the event. And unfortunately, it's not my final say who the speakers are, but we still have a wonderful lineup. And I think it's actually a good thing that I don't have the full say, because it's better to have more people involved with that.
Thank you for answering that. I just wanted to let you know that Rodrigo Vera, he was very adamant. He wanted to have me mention to you. Hal Puthoff, something I'm sure you are already aware of, Alejandro. Hal Puthoff mentioned a document out there that is real and talks about crash retrievals.
Yeah, no, he's got a good point. Hal Puthoff and Eric Davis both believe that is a real phenomenon. And that's interesting, that lends credibility, but it's just, I interviewed Eric Davis, and it's, I heard from this person who heard from that person type of stuff. So it's still, we still need more information to prove whether or not that is the case. I hope that information does come out. I hope, if it's true, then that would be extraordinary. But I just don't
sometimes
again,
in this
have enough to hang my hat on.
Sometimes in this crazy racket, you don't mind being wrong.
Oh, yeah, I love being wrong. To be honest, I really do. I love it when people point out when I am wrong, because I want to be as accurate as possible. So this happened recently. A guy named David Haith pointed out, hey, you credited this thing wrong. And I was like, oh, you're absolutely correct. I'm sorry. And I'll go and correct it and fix it, because it's all about the quest for the truth. And if I'm wrong, that's exciting, because it means that I'm going to learn something more, and I'm going to be able to correct the record.
Okay, we also have a person who's really important in the UFO community. Her name is Dr. Irina Scott. You know who she is. She used to be on the MUFON board for many years. And she's also written some books regarding ufology and history regarding Ohio. She's also related to John Purdue. Wanted to mention her question is, I would like to ask about the current news that has been on the networks about UFOs and the U.S. Navy drafting new guidelines for reporting UFOs. Now, I did want to just state her question, even though we already covered that. Did you have any last things you have to say about those topics at all?
I think that we did say everything.
Yeah, pretty much, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. Yeah, I think we covered that very well. And wanted to just let everybody know that I'm really thrilled that we have had the privilege and honor of having Alejandro on the show tonight. He's been so generous with his time, and really recommend everybody go to UFO Congress, because you're going to have the experience of a lifetime going there. You're going to make friendships that last a lifetime, and also you're going to listen to speakers and that will change you. And I just want to reassure you, it's an event worth going to. Alejandro, I want to thank you for being on our show. I want to tell everybody to please go to AlejandroTRojas.com. Please go to UFOCongress.com. And Frank, did you have any last things you wanted to talk about before we go?
Thanks, Alejandro, for coming on. It was a fantastic show, and I enjoyed it.
Well, thank you so much. I had a lot of fun too. And not only I know I'm wrong about a lot of stuff. So, we all pretty much are. So I want to say, even if I have these opinions, I love to hear other people's opinions. And I certainly do not disparage anyone else's.
Nobody gets them all 100% right in this racket. There's just no way. It's not possible.
Right.
Well, let me put it this way. If people expect you or me or Frank to be perfect regarding reporting, or anybody else in ufology, be 100% perfect all of the time, they're setting the bar too high. They need to set that for themselves. But at the same time, it's really important to, the intent is important, to want to try and be as true to evidence and facts as possible. And your intent, Alejandro, is to do that. So that's important.
Yeah, I do want to jump in really quick and say, yeah, it's true, but I really love it when somebody tells me I'm wrong and I can go back and prove them right and really rub it in.
Yeah, that can be fun. I got to admit, that's pretty fun. Well, I get to do that quite often, though. So.
Well, I do want to mention the new hybrid movie that Alejandro is in. And so I'll go ahead and drop that link right now before we stop the chat. It's really important. Alejandro, can you say something about that, please?
Yes, it's made by a bunch of friends of mine, J353 films, a couple of Johns that have been able to who created that. Some of the people, Lori Wagner, Chase, were some of the production people on that. So I love these people. They're wonderful, wonderful people. Now, abduction isn't my thing, and I told them that. But what I did represent in there is that, and what I feel is it has to be taken more seriously, because there are thousands and thousands of people that are claiming to have these experiences. And for that reason, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, for that reason alone, we really need to take a serious look at it. People don't need to be laughed at. I think mainstream science needs to take a look at it and see what's going on here.
Alejandro, I have to ask you a favor. There's a very kind person who follows us on all of our broadcasts. He's a good person. His name is Stephen Padilla. And I failed to ask his question tonight. Do you mind if I ask you his question? Because it's really important to him, and he's asked it repeatedly. And I did not mean to not ask it. Can I ask you his question? I know
who he is, and
yes.
I am, and I definitely, Stephen's great, and I definitely would love to field his question.
Okay, so here's his question. Why do you disagree with John Greenwald regarding Luis Elizondo and TTSA?
Oh, well, there's a ton of reasons. I think that, here's the issue. I think we have to be very careful of not assuming. And so, for instance, I think Greenwald is a great thinker. He's a great researcher, but he's not an interviewer for the most part. And I think that, that's hard. And when it comes to journalism, you got to give the people a chance to speak for themselves. So, for instance, there was a lot of question, how did, the name change from OSAP to ATIP? Well, we have information, or I have information, and you know where I got that? I went and asked Lou. There are questions, why didn't the New York Times cover this? Why didn't the New York Times cover this? I have those answers, and I have them in interviews and on papers because I went and talked to Leslie. I interviewed her again about something that people were questioning just last week, and I said, has anybody even come to you? Has anybody asked you this question before? And she says, no one. Well, how can you criticize or accuse these people of being dishonest without asking them themselves? And, I think it's just as a journalist, you often learn what you don't know, you don't know. You may assume that you have an idea of what is going on here, but then when you go do the research and the interviews, you find out, what? I was completely wrong. It happens to me all the time. And so I think as a journalist, we often go into it learning it's not even worth coming up with an opinion because I'm probably going to be wrong, and these people are going to tell me what's going on anyway. So a lot of these criticisms have prosaic answers, and these answers have come to light, and and they've been accurate all along. There are reasons why these discrepancies have happened over time. I even challenged Eric Davis over some of these. And I've been accused, including by John, of being too buddy-buddy with these people. But you know what? I'm buddy-buddy with John, or at least was up until recently. He's been kind of frustrated with me lately. And I've covered John, honestly. I've criticized him where I felt there's criticism, and he's taken it and responded to it. We've debated over the years. And I do that with Tom DeLonge and with Luis Elizondo, too. They don't definitely like all of the things that I report about them, but they understand that I have to be honest and I have to give the facts. And luckily, especially Lou very much appreciates that honesty and fairness. He tells me, at least you're being fair. And that's what all we can ask. And John used to believe I was fair, even though he doesn't believe that lately. But I hope as time goes on that he'll see I am being fair. Because I think that my accuracy speaks for itself. And I think I have been very accurate, and what I have shared has come to fruition.
Okay, thank you for that statement by you. I just also would like to say that, despite all of our differences, it's important for people to understand that we do try and report to the best of our ability according to our sources. What we feel is correct and true news, again, to the best of our ability. Also, it's important for everybody to know we have a right to have our own opinion. So as long as people can delineate the difference between us sharing our opinion about stuff and us sharing our source information and basing our reporting on that, those are two different things. And often I'll have people coming to me and say, I didn't really vibe with you on what you said. And I'll tell them, I'm sorry, but, that's just my perspective. I cannot agree with everybody. That would be an impossibility. And then I have some other people asking me, where did you get that information from? Well, it's because I checked with the source regarding it. And not only did I check with the source, I made sure that that source was a real individual. And it's just important that if you're able to actually have source information to the best of your ability. There's also folks that have alias names in the UFO community for a good reason. One of them is Isaac Coy, and he does a lot of reporting of documents. He goes through archives and more for the ufology community. He does us a great service. And so there's all different kinds of people in our community. And we do the best we can. The only time I take offense to anything is when people run to make a pseudo article that is based on nonsense, that's not based on evidence or facts, and they don't actually check the source of what they're talking about. So that's all I have to say about that. How do you feel about that, Alejandro?
Yeah, I would say the same. And I would say that, I think I've outlined point by point on my social media and other places when I do have, differences of opinion with John in particular. But John is a great researcher. His website's amazing. So he's a very important person. And we just don't see eye to eye.
I want to jump in and be fair to John, because he has, like I said, he's been a critic. But, again, going back to Knapp, he said haters, and I don't regard John as a hater. I believe he's a critic, not a hater.
Fair enough. All right, gentlemen. I think we've had a great evening. It's been fantastic. It's been a very lively evening, I can tell you that. So
it has been.
Yes, great interview.
Yes.
I appreciate it, Alejandro.
Yeah.
Very much so.
The chat room has just been extremely active tonight. I haven't really had the chance to read everything there, but I just see a lot of activity going on there. And Alejandro, I just want to also thank you. You're a luminary in the realm of ufology. You're a moving force. Everybody has nothing but wonderful things to say about you. And it's true. I talk to a lot of people in the ufology community, and I have heard nothing but fantastic things about you. Even people that disagree with you will tell me that they have nothing but the deepest respect for you. So thank you for being on our show. I want to tell everybody that the UFO Congress convention will be on September 4th through the 8th, and it will happen here in Phoenix, Arizona. So please do go to that. Thank you, Alejandro.
Thank you. Thank you both. This has been fun.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, and we will be back. So have a good night, and bye-bye.